G'day, folks. Welcome to the Art of Teaching podcast. Here we talk about how to become more compelling communicators in the way of Jesus. My name is John Tyson, a pastor here in New York City, and I'm joined by John Mark Comer, founder of Practicing the Way, and Jefferson Bethke, author of Take Back Your Family and To Hell with the Hustle. Welcome to Season 1.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Teaching podcast. This is going to be a special episode. We were talking just here on a break a second ago, and we wanted to serve all of you in leadership, pastors, preaching, and teaching with an entire episode on burnout, dark night of the soul, when it gets tough, when you're questioning your call, whatever it might be. But I think personally, this is a very needed topic, and I would argue one that doesn't have a ton of resources out there, or at least vulnerability from other pastors on it. So, I mean, we can start anywhere on this one. I don't know if you guys want to start narratively first.
Burnout and Dark Night of the Soul. That's a strong episode.
I mean, I think they overlap.
John Mark, take it away.
Maybe start narrative. I mean, I'm guessing, and I know obviously being in friendship with you guys, talk about a season where maybe, man, I felt burnout in X. I think I can, diagnose it because of Y now, and just what did it do to your heart? Was it corrosive? Just, you start anywhere.
Man, if every preacher or teacher knows the feeling of waking up on a Sunday morning or a few hours or a few minutes before preaching and just thinking, I have no gas in this tank. I cannot do this. I do not have another one in me. I cannot go on. And then just willing by the sheer grace of God, your body up the steps to the stage, the pulpit, whatever. And then in that moment, just feeling the grace of God. I've literally felt it in certain seasons. I would feel the grace of God just for the teaching. And then literally as I would walk off the stage, it's like I would feel it depart and my body return to just exhaustion. Tyson, you're nodding. Yes, you ever had that?
Yes, and
Mate,
amen.
I mean, so much. I mean, I feel that every Sunday. I preach 4 times. That fourth service.
Every fourth service.
I'm just like,
yeah.
did I say this? Is this real? It's so disorienting. You feel like everything you've said, you've already said, and you want to apologize. But I say that facetiously. At a larger level, I think everybody, people are lying to you. I feel like I've never felt weary or overwhelmed or exhausted. Preaching is
They're
not
either very disconnected and non-self-aware, or they're just flat out lying to you.
Communicating the gospel is it's not like other forms of speech. Why don't you share what you shared at the Art of Teaching a couple of days ago about the reason you were tired? Darrell Johnson shared it, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Darrell. So, I mean, I find preaching to be the single most holistic, exhausting thing I ever do. It's
Mind,
exhausting,
body, spirit.
Mentally, like every ounce of your
Emotions.
mind, your mental energy, your nervous system, emotionally, the criticism, socially, what it takes out of you, and then spiritually. I remember I was sitting with Darrell Johnson, who is just Prince of Preachers. He was at Hollywood Pres forever ago. Then he was the professor for preaching at Regent alongside, Eugene Peterson and J.I. Packer. I mean, he is just Prince of Preachers, just a elder statesman. And I remember him saying, well, why you're tired? He's like, when you're preaching, you're not just preaching to your church. You know that, right? And I was like, you mean like I'm preaching to the city too or something? He's like, no. He's like, you are preaching to the principalities and powers of the air.
Yes.
They are in the room listening to you, watching
and
you.
Angry.
And you are declaring to them that their reign of terror has come and is coming to a close. I'm like,
What a vision.
No wonder I'm so exhausted.
I want to take a nap.
Yeah. I mean, it's a high and holy vision,
Yes.
but no wonder you're so tired,
Yeah. I think, go ahead.
So, John, maybe we could pass it into some different categories. I'd love to hear what advice you have, maybe preaching in burnout. What is the cause of it? And then maybe unpack it in spiritually, physically,
I was going to ask
mentally,
the exact
emotionally.
same question with signposts. Like I do think, especially post-COVID, pastors are wrestling with, just exhaustion to the point that's unhealthy. There's normal exhaustion, there's normal recovery.
Yes.
But burnout is a specific thing. So maybe if both you guys or you, what is it? What is burnout? What would you qualify it as pastoral burnout? And then maybe what are some signs? Like, because I do think some people aren't self-aware enough, because when you're burning out, you're going so fast, you're not paying attention. So what is it? And then how can they actually diagnose a little bit of like, ooh, I might be in the middle of this and I haven't thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, so just in modern culture, like burnout is a rite of passage for millennials. You know, it's just like a common, it's cliche. Expected. But there is a very noticeable uptick in pastoral burnout for the last few years with COVID, and even pre-COVID with a lot of the political uptick. There's been a dramatic shift in expectations on pastors around politics since the election of President Trump. And I'm not making any claims there. I'm just saying there has been a noticeable dramatic shift.
It's a sociological reality.
Yeah, so my therapist gave me this really helpful paradigm. He was a pastor forever ago, and he's very intelligent. He gave me a really helpful paradigm. So, you know, if you look at all the research around work and work satisfaction, you can kind of think about like 3 levels that levers that you're adjusting for. One is the amount of like stress and challenge in a job. So think of like, you know, the psychology of flow. If you have too much stress, too much responsibility, too much pressure, you feel anxiety and stress in your system, and that just exhausts you. Much of burnout is just the chronic
distress.
Stress. Yes, distress and its effect on your body. If you actually don't have enough, you're bored out of your mind.
Eustress.
Yes. So there are people that their problem is not too much stress in their job. It's boredom. It's lack of challenge. It's lack of calling up skill out of them. It's just maintenance. That's very boring, especially for kind of often like intellectual types or leader types. So that's one level. The other level is control, or amount of connection that you have to the success of your work. So there's lots of data on the correlation between job satisfaction and the amount of control that you have on your work. So, for example, you know, Marx made an entire like cultural critique of industrial capitalism around what he called the alienation of the worker. That would be like the ultimate work. Like you're on an assembly line in a factory, and you're not the carpenter from a century before who literally cut the tree down and turned the tree into a chair, and then you met so-and-so that was going to buy the table and chairs, and you met their children, and you knew about their home and what it was going to mean in their life to have meals on this table, and you have this sense of job satisfaction in this hypothetical scenario, connection, and like feeling good about like the work of your hands. And then fast forward 100 years, and like you screw 4 bolts in to put the legs on, and then it goes on down the assembly line. You never meet the person. Times. You never see the joy of the job. Like that's the worst example, right? So there's such a correlation, and that's a great challenge in pastoring, because you don't have control over people. People are not widgets. They're not a block of wood that if you're really good with it, you can make it awesome. They have freedom, autonomy, and this is all a good thing, but it's a great challenge to pastoral work. And then the third level is reward. Like, do you get reward? Do you get a sense of kickback from your work? Now, that could be financial reward. Lots of people hate their jobs, but they keep working at it because they're making so much money. It could be social status, like you get, you know, like there's people respect you and honor you for it. It could be you just really enjoy it. It could be that it gives you freedom of hours. Like, I don't love this job, but it kind of lets me pick my own hours, and I like that because I like to go surfing in the morning or take my kids to school. It's different forms of reward, right? So normally, pastoral work is high stress, low control, high reward. So pastoral work is always a lot of stress. It's just always, you never have enough hours in the day, enough days in the week to get the job done. It's a black hole of need. You can never meet everybody's expectations. So it's always kind of high stress, higher than most people want. And it's always, for the most part, low control. Very rarely as a pastor do you feel like there's a strong tie between how hard you work, what you do, what thoughtfulness you bring to the job, and how well it goes. You can do everything right, and the church can still go badly. And you can do a lot of things wrong, and God's grace can still bless and grow a church, right? This is where I think a lot of pastors go wrong. They think that God's blessing is on their church because of their strategy, and often it's in spite of their strategy. God is so gracious and kind, and the heart matters more than, you know, those other things. But then normally there's a lot of reward. Like, it's a sense of meaningful work. Like, man, this is so hard, And it's so frustrating at times, and I'm stressed and I'm tired, but man, look at this. This church is coming together. This community is being formed. These people are so grateful. Lives are being changed. People are coming into the kingdom. But for the last few years, in particular since 2020, pastoral work has been basically high stress, low control, low reward. And that right there is that is the clinical recipe for burnout.
Wow.
High stress,
Wow.
low control, low reward. And that's the world that many pastors are living in right now.
What would you guys say are signs then of that in your life? Like, what's it feel like, smell like, taste like when you're living as a
pause for a second and
pastor?
say, John Mark, that is one of the most helpful things. That's one of the best diagnostics of pastoral work I've ever heard. That alone is a gift. So thank you. That is really, really helpful.
Thank you to Dr. Jim Lundy.
Yes.
Well, thanks.
A
Thank
few-
you, Dr.
a few
Lundy.
Added maybe a bitter piece for there, but that's
Yeah,
That
since
was
him.
But
I remember sitting on the phone with him and him saying, yeah, burnout's a function of high stress, low control, low reward.
So
I've
good.
not stopped thinking about it since.
So bring that down now. What is on the ground? What does that look like? And it can be from personal story. What does it start looking like in your life to feel like with the Lord, with your spouse, with
the
your
phrase
church, with
that
your
I hear
kids?
myself saying and I hear pastors saying a lot the last few years is, I didn't sign up for this. In particular with the political stuff
Yep.
and the political polarization, dealing like having to refute conspiracy theories or on the left deal with postmodern version of conspiracy theories, which start with the C but have a different word after that. Like
Yes.
Yep.
having to deal with that. Like I didn't sign up for that. I got into this to help people pray, to help people deepen their surrender to Jesus as Lord. I did not get in this to like give people political statements to affirm their view on whatever issue. And so if you hear yourself saying, I didn't sign up for this, first off, you are so not alone. Secondly, that's likely a sign of what's coming.
Yeah. Hey everyone, if you're listening, we just want to take a quick break and tell you about some ways that we think you can go deeper in your preaching, teaching, and leading. And that is, we have retreats in Vermont, we got workshops in Maui, and we have a conference coming up in Nashville that we would love to see you there. Bring your team, bring yourself. It's gonna be a blast. There's a lot of details on the website, artofteaching.co. We'll probably put it up here or down in the description. But we love you and we'd love to see you there. Would you add anything to that, John, of what it looks like, feels like?
I think, I think part of it is our expectations of what we went into it for. I mean, I don't want to be too harsh, but I do think, what did you sign up for? And was what you signed up for what the Bible teaches? You read the Apostle Paul's and it's
Absolutely not. Join with me in suffering.
Yeah, and we despaired of life itself. We wrestled with wild beasts at Ephesus. Yeah, so I again, part of it, we live in such an HR sustainability oriented framework that we can sometimes forget that that's not the promise of serving Jesus.
We signed up for participation in the sufferings of Christ.
Yeah, we love the power
we
of the
should
resurrection.
have, but I don't think I read the fine print. It
Not the
wasn't in the
fellowship
fine
of
print. It was
somebody's-
actually in bold, and I just ignored it.
You didn't read
Yes.
the terms and service?
So
Service?
we do want to say that part of what we did sign up for is that. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, hey, we're dealing with a level of complexity. A wicked problem is defined as a problem that's like it's you can't pull it apart and solve it. It's like staggeringly complex, and we're dealing with wicked problems. And so I think a lot of times, in spite of your best effort, you actually won't make much progress.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
nature of the challenges that we face. They're not solvable. They're not fixable. They're constant, overwhelming tensions that have to be managed, and we just have not been equipped to manage tensions for sustained periods of time. It's quick fix society. It's everything should be better soon. We're so pragmatic. We're technique oriented. And none of that stuff like works with the kind of issues that we're facing. So that produces a sense of overwhelm. I will say this. This is my number one sign. And I actually don't think I think I've only ever technically burned out once. And it's a long story. The fruit of it was, I can describe it as I was in a fight with my wife while we were driving. And I said, please don't push me any further. I'm so fragile. And I'm a pretty strong person. I don't think she understood the degree of my fragility. And she just pushed me 1 degree further. And I can't describe it any other way than I felt something in my soul snap. Like something just broke in me that I cannot articulate in my inner being. And I slept for about 16 hours a day for 10 days and could not get out of bed. And after that, I was like, was able to be like, whew, man, what was that? But that was a level of compounded stress. So the phrase like something in my soul broke, that's not it. So one time, what was the thing leading up to it that led to that? It was a sense of dread. I dreaded going to church.
Excitement's gone.
I dreaded
It's like the opposite of hope.
Yes, like I just only obligation, only responsibility. No, like just so when I thought about doing it, I remember I would try and walk home. I would walk home from work, which was the previous joy of my life. And I had such a level of dread. I would have to stop 3 times for like 15 minutes at a time to gather myself to walk the rest of the distance. So I've had heat stroke before. I basically had pastoral stroke, which is like I just couldn't go on. So that sense of dread, disproportionate fatigue, anger, unbridled anger, volcanic anger. That's the phrase out of nowhere, like, hey man, are you good? Yes, stuff like that. There are a few of the things I think I've experienced.
Those are great signs. Yeah, I mean, you guys
everything's gray. You know what I mean? You just see everything through this like filter of ennui. You know what I mean? There's no hopefulness. There's no energy. And you can tell it's burnout because it can't be solved by rest. Like rest is not actually curative for burnout. It's curative for exhaustion, which is different.
But you're on fire right now.
Yeah.
You are on fire. JMC, peak of his powers.
Because exhaustion can be fixed with the body,
rest.
the right body habits, sleep and eat healthy and drink a bunch of water and go for a long run, or if you're too tired, a long walk, get some sunshine, get some vitamin D, not from a pill, and then you feel yourself coming back. It's burnout when you do all of those things. You attend to the body, and I think as a general rule, always start with the body. I think most Christians err when they try to start with prayer or emotional thing or mental hygiene. Like start with the body, like attend to your soma. Your body will wear out. But when you do all of those things and you still can't get out of bed and you still, like I feel it a lot. I just feel it so much in my body. Like I ran for many, many years. I just stopped not that long ago on my last sabbatical in a moment of burnout. I just couldn't run anymore. I literally, it doesn't matter how many hours I slept, I just could not push it took too much emotionally for me to run. And so I could just walk. That's all I could do. I would just start walking is the most I could do. So it's burnout because burnout is not actually a physical problem. It's a mental, emotional problem. And that's why it's happening in these societies to people whose bodies are in great shape and their environment's wonderful. Like, have you noticed how often knowledge workers, people in cities will use the phrase survival? Like there's this, we think of like ancient humans, early human beings and hunter-gatherer tribes were literally just trying to survive, not get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or whatever, not starve to death. Like that was a survival society. But now you have all these people making tons of money. You have way more food than they could ever need, throwing food out every week that goes bad in the fridge, and they're safer than they've ever been. And, we live in an industrial, civilized world, all of this stuff. And you hear people say, I'm just trying to survive to the weekend, or I'm just trying to survive till I get through this work project, or I'm just trying to survive till I get through Easter. I'm just trying to survive till I get through this writing deadline on the next book. Or we're still in survival mode. And it's not our bodies that are under duress. It's our minds, it's our identities, it's our emotions, it's our relationships, it's our place in the world. That's where burnout comes from. Chronic pressure on the mind and the heart that you feel in your body, but it's actually not a body-based problem.
What did it feel like to be in that, but still having to get up on Sunday and teach? Or what did it feel like to be in? Exactly. Talk about that. Maybe go a little bit more narrative.
Just really talk. Walking through.
What was the church? What was the church size at that time? Or maybe how many times were you preaching? Just give us the real. What was it a week? What did a Sunday feel like for you in that burnout season? And just what
I'm getting depressed reflecting on this. It's taken me back.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just wish I could say Tyson's thing one time in my life. I mean, gosh, for me, it's been multiple times.
Really? Yeah.
You've totally burned out. You've hit the
3
wall.
or 4 times over 20 years.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Talk about it. Which ones stand out to you, and when was it, and what'd you learn?
Well, I remember. I mean, once was after a season. I mean, our church grew really fast, and at its zenith, I was preaching 6 times every Sunday.
I mean, that'll do it. That'll do
At
it.
that point, burnout is a body-based problem.
That'll do it.
And I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, by that, those last couple sermons, I had no idea if I'd said what I'd said before or not, and I was
That's Twilight Zone
angry,
preaching,
and
yeah.
I could, I mean, gosh, that was a terrible time in my life. And I remember I demoted myself, resigned from that kind of position, and went on my first sabbatical. And I still remember we spent a bunch of money to rent this beach house we love for the first 10 days or something. It's this place we love. We vacationed there every year for 18 years or whatever. And I just remember I slept, not straight like 24 hours, but basically I have no memory of that week. Wow. I just remember I would sleep in the morning. It took everything to walk up the stairs. They had this incredible couch that was it had down in the cushions. It was an unbelievable
just like
couch.
this one.
Yes. I would read a psalm. That's all I could do to pray. I could not get past reading one psalm is all and generally in God's direction. It's the most I could do. And then I would fall back on the couch and I would nap the rest of the day. And I don't nap. I'm I'm not like Tyson. I cannot nap.
I'm a napper.
And I basically just slept. We'd watch a movie at night and I'd go back to bed. And I have no memory really of that entire 10-day period or whatever. It was just
Can I ask you a question? Did you not have anybody around you who was like, hey, preaching 6 times is a bad idea?
No, man, it was mega church culture. There was so much you got to seize the momentum, and we can't miss this, and there's need, and we got to go. And I'm not blaming it on them. I was ambitious.
Yeah.
I was driven. There was ego underneath all of
Just
that.
no one paused to say, hey, maybe this is a bad idea.
Or maybe they did, and I just didn't listen.
Yeah.
You're young.
I was
in good
young,
shape, feeling
I was
good.
ambitious, I was full of ego, but I was definitely in a church echo chamber where the thought of saying, we filled up one gathering or 2 gatherings or even 3 gatherings.
Or 4 or 5.
And this is already a large church and it has grown. We just are not going to add anymore because we can't do that and honor the limitations of our body. That was just not even in the worldview.
Was Video Venue around then?
Yeah, and it was. That was when Video Venue was exploding, and we were getting requests from other churches. Could we become a video venue? What if you did that? And I was just so philosophically opposed to it. And again, I was young. I was zealous. There's a lot of anger and self-righteousness in me at the time. Not that it's gone now, and I was just always philosophically opposed to the video venue model. And so I instead just chose to kill myself.
Yeah,
I don't know that I've ever recovered from that.
So I think, gosh, I've gotten so many things wrong in my life in ministry. I could start listing them off. I don't say that hypothetically. I have a very long list of things I don't think I've done well. But I do think, which is sort of answering the question, how do you beat burnout? I feel like I've heard so many talks. I remember coming into ministry and every conference I went to was the most successful guy that I was in awe of saying, I lost my soul, my kids hated me.
I burned it, saying what I just said.
Yeah, I had to take a year off to undo all the damage of what I did building this thing. And I do remember thinking to myself, gosh, I am the biblical definition of a fool if I do not catch my pace. And I've always tried, I think it's different for everybody. People have different capacities, but I think I've always tried to find the limit. And there's times I've gone over it, but I think I've been disproportionately concerned I think I've hit my capacity. Okay, do not go beyond this. And maybe that is, it's watching all of my heroes burn out. And so I think I might have had more of an awareness of the dangers of burning out. Again, similarly around super aggressive leaders in the mega church, and just thinking, I'm not sure the price is worth it. So I think that idea has saved me. The idea of the line, finding the boundary of your capacity.
Yeah, and you're right that different people have different capacities. I know you well enough to know that you have a much higher capacity than I do. And I know myself well enough to know I have a lower capacity than most pastors of large churches, a lower emotional capacity. I have a high task capacity.
Yeah.
So I can get crap done.
That is true.
I can wake up in the morning. If you look at the output of my work, I put a lot out into the world. I can get crap done.
Yeah.
But what happens to me is there's this, Like if I were to draw it on a piece of paper, there's a high level of work that I can accomplish at a decent level of proficiency.
Yeah.
And then much lower than that is a line at which if I cross this, I am no longer a kind, patient, loving, happy person. And that line is way lower. And there's no one in my life and nothing in the culture of church that wants to hold me at that line. Gosh. Everything wants to push me to the absolute maximum of my like physical capacity. And so much of my discipleship has been, learning to live at that lower line or trying to push my life down. So you have to know your capacity and you have to recognize, listen, Tyson's capacity is more than mine, and you have to make peace with that. And you have to recognize that this is one of the main ways that the enemy comes against us. Tyson, was it you who said to me, we were talking about this, I think it was you, years ago, that if you study revival history, so many of them ended when the leaders all burned out. Because they could not sustain a move of God. If I go back to that period where we were preaching 6 times, the cynical read is like this was an attractional mega church and people just wanted success and da-da-da.
But the good read is it was revival.
The other read was I was in a genuine move of God. Probably 25% of that church were new believers in Jesus. Wow. That is uncommon for a mega church. Many hundreds or thousands of people were coming to faith in Jesus. I'm not an evangelist. There was a genuine move of God afoot that I think ended up sabotaged because we could not keep pace with it and we let it outrun. I remember my mentor saying to me, this was actually the second time I burned out. So I demoted myself. I radically changed my life, went full on like my version of Eugene Peterson, went down to one church, we were multi-site or whatever, moved, walked to work every single day, had the most emotionally healthy 4-year period of my life, 2 years of which I just spent in mild depression. It was like coming off of a drug. It was an unhappy time in my life. 2 years of the healthiest I'd ever been, followed by the most fruitful and effective season of ministry I've ever been in my whole life. But then, same thing happened again. And now I'm not at a mega church. I'm not teaching 6 times, but now my books have done well, and I've written this book on hurry that a bunch of people have found helpful. And then everybody's inviting me to speak, and I'm traveling around the world telling everybody to slow down. I remember it hit me at one point. I had missed 6 Sabbaths in a row because I was gone preaching on Sabbath.
Wow.
That's so good. And I was burning out again. And I was miserable, and it was like this repeat of what had happened to me, 8 years before or whatever with the mega church. And I'm like, what the heck? And my mentor sat me down, and I was in a bad way. And he said this, he said, if the enemy can't under-promote you, he will over-promote you faster than your rhythms of grace and your character can sustain. And I realized the enemy had gotten in there in a subtle way. He'd realized I wasn't going to fall for the up and to the right megachurch temptation. I was going to just fall for a different one, a book one or a whatever one, or I'm going to be the incarnational urban pastor one. And he had created too many opportunities for me that I had then said yes to, not out of some blatant, clear, out of just this almost like deception more than out of obstinacy toward the will of God.
I think I met you when we were talking in the early stages of, I've got a big, huge church, I'm going to chop it into smaller pieces and do an incarnational thing. And I think that's where our friendship really started. And I remember you being, I sensed a lot of peace in you at that point. I feel like that decision was a really good decision.
Yeah, one of the best decisions of my life. I just wish I could have made it sooner.
It's so, yes, I think people will be so encouraged to hear that from you. Do you know what I mean? I think you said something that's really interesting, the difference between your output and your emotional capacity. What are those two, paying attention to those two lines? Because, your ability to get stuff done is really remarkable. But I do think people will be surprised at, I
actually have a low emotional capacity, if you know me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to pay attention to that. How do you sort of deal with burnout, mate? You wrote To Hell with the Hustle.
You cussed in the book title, bro.
You Hell the Hustle. You guys did a podcast on it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think learning from you guys, being, just influenced by you guys. I think
because internet culture is like a different type of grind.
I agree. I feel like I have to think.
You have to always be
it.
online, always answering comments, always.
I have to think through it almost entirely digitally is where it gets me. You know what I mean? And so, I think the tech boundaries, rhythms with that is super key. I think that's, which we've all talked about before. But I think one question I wanted to ask, just for time's sake, and only one of you can take it if you want, but I wanted to ask, out of the whole burnout things, whether it was multiple seasons, one season, what do you feel like it did to your faith? What do you feel like it did to your faith or your walk with the Lord?
Can I just ask a question? Is this going to have to be a two-parter? Because we've only talked about what burnout is and does.
Let's not cut this thing short.
We haven't talked about how to overcome burnout, which could be part
one
two.
of you guys just take that answer, and then the next episode we'll do part 2.
JMC, I feel like you're on fire, mate. Take it.
Yeah, what did it do to your faith? What did burnout start doing to your faith? And that'll lead into the part 2.
We're such holistic beings that I find if we grind our body and our emotional life down, we like my felt experience. I couldn't give you chapter and verse for this. This is just my felt experience. Is I begin to obliterate my spiritual sense of life with God. Like I began to develop a pattern where every year when I would take a long vacation, which became a key part of like mitigating against burnout and bringing sustainability into my life, was long vacations because of that weekly grind of Sunday and of preaching. The little 3 days I got away and we saw a concert here or whatever. That's fun.
Yeah.
But my person, I needed a long break every summer from preaching, from leading. And I would find how long, we would call it comeback. There was always a moment where at some point in the vacation, we go to the same beach house every single year, I would just come back. And all of a sudden I was like happy, and I would find I didn't need a nap in the afternoon. And again, I'm not a napper, but every year I'd nap the first, and was it like I napped 1 day, 3 days, 3 weeks, and how long it took me to like come back where I was happy and enjoying my life and cooking dinner for my family was kind of a litmus test for the level of sustainability or insustainability, if that's a word, in my kind of rule of life through that year. But where I would really notice it is I would begin on purpose to just like attend to my body first, sleep, good food, sunshine, sitting on the beach, and really not pressing too hard into prayer. I mean, I would read a psalm every day. I love Jesus deeply, but I wasn't like trying to pray or seek God for direction over my life. I would save all of that for the end of my vacation, which I would normally end with some solitude days, intense journaling, seeking God for a vision for how we come back. I would intentionally do it at the end because you just have to attend to your body first. And what I find is when I am exhausted, I don't hear God's voice. I don't sense God's presence. I don't sense God coming to me. I might sense God's grace coming on me for ministry. Like often in those seasons of extreme exhaustion, I would really sense God upon me when I was preaching, giving me grace to do what I needed to do. But in like morning prayer, which is normally the highlight of my day, and in Sabbath, which is normally the highlight of my week, not ministry, not production, I've definitely come to a spot where I'm at my best not when I'm producing, not when I'm doing, when I am just being with God. And but I would just feel nothing. It was just like spiritual desolation. And I began to realize that there's
desolation.
deep spiritual danger. And I have come to believe that, I forget who it was that I first heard say that, rest is spiritual warfare. Like one of the enemy's strategies against you is to burn you out, hollow you out, and steal, kill, and destroy your long-term ministry. And so rest is not just about feeling good. It is a form of fighting back against the enemy and his stratagems against you.
Yeah, I think we want to continue this conversation. So we'll keep going. But I think just to end and put a bow on it with that in those seasons, when you're feeling it that word was so perfect because it is so captures the severity. Spiritual desolation is real for leaders, pastors, teachers, preachers. I think what I would just leave you guys with is that the tenderness of God is also very real. It is very real. It meets you. It's for you. It's with you. And it's inside of you. And so that's what we're going to talk about on part 2. We're going to talk about how to overcome it. And we're going to talk about how to move forward when you feel like this.